Chapter 10, The Blue Sheets. When the producers arrived at school on Monday, they found the Fuzzy and Puffy show already in progress on the playground. 2 sixth graders were beating each other up over a saucer of milk in front of a wildly cheering crowd. "Attaboy, Puffy! Kick his butt!" "Way to hang in there, Fuzzy! That milk is rightfully yours!" With a bone-chilling scream, the boy playing Puffy threw his counterpart to the ground, grabbed him by the hair, and rasped, "All right, Fuzzy, you dirtbag! Last chance! Share or die!" "Cut it out!" cried Ellen Louise. She was drowned out by the roar of laughter that went up as Fuzzy and Puffy, once again at the point of murder, declared themselves the best friends in the whole world, and headed off arm in arm for a catnip party. "Boy, oh boy," said Mark, looking around nervously. "These people sure take risks. If Jaworski shows up and sees this, there'll be heads all over the place." Benji groaned. "I'd forgotten about Fuzzy and Puffy because, believe it or not, on the list of disasters, it has to come fourth. First, we almost killed the mascot of the week. Second, we sent our one and only sponsor on a 5-mile run. And third, we messed up the show completely because of 1 and 2. Now, half the kids have to come back next week. You saw how Arthur almost freaked out when we had to cut his commentary." "At least we got the quiz in," Mark pointed out with an attempt at cheerfulness. "And that's the only reason we didn't get canceled," Benji retorted. "It's a good thing all the poop scoop owners in this town don't already have dogs." He frowned. "We could have sold a parrot, too, except that Mr. Whitehead didn't catch that truck until half an hour after the show was over." "Look on the bright side," said Mark. "If that truck had overdrive, Winston Churchill would be in Mexico by now, learning Spanish." The bell rang, interrupting several new versions of the Fuzzy and Puffy saga. The 4th, 5th, and 6th graders swarmed toward their entrance. There, they found Brad Jaworski blocking the way. "Everybody gets one of these," announced the Venice Menace grimly, handing out blue mimeographed sheets to the bewildered students. "Fill out your name and address, and where it says comments, I want your honest opinion of my 2 stories. I need lots of input, because remember, it was you guys who inspired me to pick writing as my real career. So if you don't put that much down, I'll think you don't really care. Got it?" An uncomfortable murmur spread through the students. They filed by Brad silently, each accepting a blue form. Occasionally, someone would say, "Nice story, Brad," or "Great stuff Saturday." Brad looked at them sternly. "Save it for the comments section." Ellen Louise had other plans for the survey. "This is our opportunity to tell Brad what we really think of those terrible stories and how everybody's laughing at him," she whispered to Benji and Mark. "And we don't have to do it face to face." "Don't be an idiot," said Mark. "We have to put who we are and where we live on those forms. How'd you like to come home one day and find the Venice Menace waiting for you?" "It's a moral duty," she retorted. "We can't let poor Brad go on thinking that he has a career ahead of him when he's the worst author in the world." Benji shuddered and reached for a paper. "Hold it. Not you 3, said Brad seriously. "I want real opinions. You guys are my producers." "Good thinking," cried Benji, his relief evident. "We're with Kids View, so we don't count." With a triumphant grin at Ellen Louise, he led the way to their classroom. It was as he was stowing his books that Benji noticed the back corner of the room was empty. "Hey, there's no one in the pit." "They're there," said Arthur through clenched teeth. "They're under the desks." "We're hiding," came a muffled voice from the pit. "On Saturday, we tuned in to our favorite show, Kids View, starring Benjamin Driver. But there was no weekly warning from Scaredy Cats. So we don't know what disaster to look out for this week." "We're taking no chances," came another voice. "If there's an earthquake and the ceiling caves in, we'll be protected. If it's cosmic radio waves from space, they'll bounce off our desks. If 60-foot cockroaches take over the world, they won't see us down here. And if a giant power saw blade sweeps across town 3 feet from the ground, we've got it made. Arthur could bear it no longer. It wasn't any of that dumb stuff. It was about what would happen if all the water on Earth suddenly evaporated. There was dead silence, and then a loud stage whisper. Psst! Did anybody remember to fill the canteen? Ms. P breezed in, high heels clicking, hair bouncing, and by the time Benji looked back, the 5 pit people had reappeared. Good morning, everybody. Please take out your independent research assignments. She turned to the 3 producers. Benji, Ellen Louise, Mark, I'm so sorry, but I missed your show on Saturday. Benji managed a small murmur of disappointment. You simply won't believe what happened, the teacher went on. The new radio I ordered didn't arrive, or at least I thought it hadn't arrived. But when I called the store to complain, they said it had been delivered and my son had returned it. I'm not even married. So I went down there. It's all the way across town, you know. And they showed me the return slip. I have no idea who filled it out. Fred, somebody. You couldn't read it. The writing was so messy, it looked like another language. And the reason for the return was the silliest part of all. It was hard to make out, but I'm pretty sure it said, I hate this radio. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous? What kind of store accepts that excuse? Maybe they thought you returned it because you hate it, suggested Mark defensively. Well, maybe that was their thinking, said Miss P dubiously. But anyway, I've got my radio now, so next Saturday, I promise I'll definitely listen to your show. Oh, that's great, said Benji feebly. He had been hoping that the misunderstanding over the radio would carry on for weeks. On the way out for recess, the producers had to thread their way through the halls. It was tricky not to step on the many students who were sprawled out on the floor, filling out the blue forms for the Venice Menace. By this time, Benji's mind was totally occupied with the problem that in 5 days, Kidsview would have to run the weekly trivia quiz with Miss P in the radio audience. Now we can't get at the radio, he reasoned as they emerged onto the playground, because it's already in her apartment. I've got an uncle, Mark offered, who can get through any lock with just a hairpin. Yeah, said Benji. Where is he? In jail, Mark admitted. Where you two belong, added Ellen Louise. How can you even think of breaking into an apartment? That's illegal. We're not going to break the law, Benji promised. But we've got to do something. She can't hear the quiz. I know. Mark can go over to her place and engage her in conversation while the quiz is on. Conversation? Howled Mark. What am I going to say to her? Hey, great seminar you've got there. Too bad nobody understands any of it. Listen, you guys, Ellen Louise threatened. If you do anything nasty to Miss P, you'll be sorry. What about Winston Churchill? Asked Mark. Don't even mention his name, growled Benji. The new plan is to keep him away from you. We'll go by the store to make sure he remembers what he has to say. And from that point on, Ellen and I will take care of him. Hey, you! The 3 wheeled to see Brad Jaworski dragging one of his classmates away from a game of handball. I need you to clear up some things, ordered the Venice Menace, waving a blue sheet in the startled boy's face. Like, here you said that the characters are stupendous. What do you mean? I mean they're great, the boy stammered. I really like them. Why? Well, I feel sorry for Puffy because Fuzzy gets everything, but Fuzzy always turns out to be a nice guy in the end. And that's stupendous? Brad queried. The boy shrugged uneasily. I think so. Good. and Brad moved on to select another unfortunate soul to explain his comments on the blue sheet. Benji was awestruck. He's not going to go to every single kid in the school, is he? Mark looked at Ellen Louise pityingly. And you wanted to tell him the truth. As the week progressed, the fuzzy and puffy jokes became fewer and fewer, and the skits dropped off to zero. The whole affair had changed from hilarious to weird. All week at recess and lunch hours, the Venice Menace prowled the playground, interviewing students one-on-one about their blue survey forms. There was only one thing worse than being questioned by Brad Jaworski, and that was not being questioned, but knowing it was coming. That at any moment, the largest hand at Centennial Park School would clamp onto your shoulder and call you to account for your opinions of Fuzzy and Puffy. "This is awful," said Benji on Wednesday, as a fourth grade game of jump rope was interrupted and a quaking 10-year-old girl was hauled off for interrogation. "He is a monster. The whole school's scared to death." Ellen Louise shrugged indifferently. Of what? He isn't beating anybody up. He isn't even being mean. He just wants opinions on his writing. He's asking a bunch of stupid questions and getting even stupider answers. All because you guys don't have the guts to lay it on the line. His stories stink. "It could be a whole lot worse," Mark reminded them. "It could be us getting the third degree." "But where's it going to end?" Benji asked. "I mean, last week he was satisfied with a few compliments. This week he needs a signed statement and conference. He'll go on again on Saturday, and who knows?" "What's next? We'll have to sacrifice a goat on the altar of Fuzzy and Puffy." "It'll probably all blow over eventually," said Mark. "But the first few kids who give Jaworski the wrong answers are going to get what Puffy says he'll do to Fuzzy." "It'll blow over all right," Benji agreed grimly. "And when it does, the only thing everybody's going to remember is that it happened because of Kids View." The producers didn't get to Our Animal Friends until Thursday because they were hard at work on the seminar's latest project, a shoebox diorama representing humanity's relationship to its environment, including at least 15 events from history. "This is the dumbest project yet," was Mark's reaction. "Even worse than the Atomic Symposium, whatever that was." "We've got to work fast," said Benji. "We have to get the parrot ready for Saturday." The good news of the week was that Winston Churchill showed no ill effects from his wild ride last weekend. He was healthy and cheerful and talking a blue streak. With a little review, he and Benji worked out a routine that was 99 and 44/100% sure to make someone in the radio audience say, "I simply must buy this parrot." One problem remained: keeping Ms. P from hearing her own independent research assignment read out as the weekly trivia quiz. Benji and Mark experimented with writing their own questions, but soon abandoned that idea. Benji's questions were all too easy. What country is London the capital of? And Mark's bordered on idiotic. Who invented bamboo? "We've got people tuning in just because of the quiz," said Benji. "If we give them a bunch of dumb questions like those, they'll stop listening, and our ratings will go down. We have to use her stuff, because that's what made us a hit show." On Friday night, Benji put his worries and problems aside and got ready for a radio event that happened all too rarely these days. His idol, Eldridge Kestenbaum, was coming out of retirement to host a half-hour broadcast from Hershey, Pennsylvania, a tribute to chocolate. Benji's radio had a special power booster so it could tune in stations from all over North America. Now he sat, his baby sister on his knee, listening to the high school basketball scores from the chocolate capital of the world. In a few minutes, the show would begin. "Now remember, kid, you promised no talking, no crying, no fidgeting. This is Eldridge Kestenbaum, and I have to hear every word." There was a beep of a time signal, And then a beloved voice announced, "Good evening, I'm Eldridge Kestenbaum, and this is a tribute." A loud pop came from the speaker, followed by a steady roar of static. It completely drowned out the program. With a gasp, Benji jumped up and began checking his dials and twisting knobs madly. Nothing he did had any effect. Even the local stations had the same problem. He moved the antenna back and forth and checked all the connections. No results. Desperately, he began pounding on the top of the set. Still nothing. He ripped at his hair, threw his head back, and shrieked, "Eldridge Kestenbaum is on the air, and I'm missing it." Erin looked up at him sternly and put a finger to her lips. "Shh." Okay, stay calm," Benji told himself aloud. "Interference. It has to be interference. Something in the house." Frantically, he raced into the living room. His father was asleep in an easy chair, and the TV was off. The microwave! He dashed into the kitchen. All the appliances were at rest. What could it be? At top speed, he steamed into his parents' bedroom. There stood his mother at the mirror, putting the finishing touches on her hair with a battery-operated dryer. Aha! He snatched the dryer from her hands, switched it to off, and ran with it back to his room. She followed. "Benji, what are you—" "Sorry, Mom," he panted. "It was knocking out the radio, but it's perfect now. Listen." Eldridge Kestenbaum was describing the history of the cacao bean in a flat, informative tone. On the floor, Erin was fast asleep. "May I have my dryer back?" Mrs. Driver requested politely. "If I promise not to turn it on again until His Majesty is finished talking." Benji didn't hear her. So great was his concentration on the broadcast. "Benji, hand over my dryer. I don't want anything to happen to it. Your Aunt Shirley brought it from Sweden. You can't even get this brand here, you know. It's the only kind that doesn't damage my scalp." Absently, Benji held out the dryer. Shaking her head, his mother accepted it and left the room. The rest of the broadcast was sheer bliss. Vintage Kestenbaum. Why, he almost made you taste the chocolate. When it was over, Benji sprang to his feet energetically, more determined than ever to be the next Eldridge Kestenbaum, a credit to his craft. Best of all, he now knew how to keep Miss P from listening to Kids View tomorrow. He wondered if there were any chocolate bars in the pantry.